From the latest on Caribbean cruises to kosher safaris, pilgrimages to Jewish Eastern Europe, and award-winning wines and international cuisine in sun-drenched Tel Aviv. Sit back and enjoy the trip with the travel edition of the Jerusalem Post podcast. We're on the road again.
Have we done that on every podcast where we've been in a car? Do you not know any more road-related? Row your boat.
Oh, Mark, very good morning to you. How are you doing?
Good afternoon, David.
And good evening, listener. We are headed out of the Azerbaijani capital. Spread in front of us are some of the suburbs of this city of 4 million people. We're headed away from Baku and out into the countryside.
We're heading north to I think it's a town, or is it a city? But it has a population of roughly 50,000 people, and it's called Guba.
Or Kuba. It's either spelt with a Q or a G at the start. Something that we've been coming to terms with, and you'll have heard us absolutely slaughtering the Azerbaijani language in the previous episode that we brought to you from Baku, is this difficulty of pronunciation because the letters are not what they appear to be. So, for example, the letter X is pronounced H.
There's an E that's back to front that's more eh.
And there's two letter I's, one with a dot at the top and one without a dot at the top, and one is I and one is U. And our guide, Suleiman, who you'll probably remember from our previous episode, is laughing in the front seat because he's listening to us trying to explain his language to probably a lot of people who are actually never ever going to speak Azerbaijani in their life.
And I don't know if I mentioned this on the last podcast, but Suleiman, in fact, slaughtered my Hebrew because he's a fluent Hebrew speaker and does it with a much better Hebrew accent than I ever do.
Making for an excellent tour guide. We are going to be bringing you 2 or 3 locations outside of Baku, the capital. In all probability, when you arrive in this country, you will do so by air into the capital, and then from there it's about renting a car, taking public transport, or even an internal flight to various parts of the country. We're taking a 2.5 hour journey now into the mountains.
My gosh, how cheap is the petrol here?
Go on, how cheap is the petrol or gasoline?
It was somewhere between 1 and 2 manat, which is around, try and get my sums here, between 1 and 2 manat, and $1 will buy you 1.7 manat as of May 2024.
Yeah, but you're talking in litres, and now you're going to have to transfer litres into gallons.
Oh gosh.
So it's by times 4.
4 or 4.4, I think the US is 4.
Oh, because there's US and there's imperial gallons.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, if you actually rent a car here, the gasoline is cheap.
Because it's plentiful.
Shall we do a quiz question, Mark?
Yes. We were in Georgia last month, and if you remember that podcast, or you listened to that podcast from Batumi, we mentioned a novel, which was a love story between a Khan from Azerbaijan and a princess from Georgia.
A love story.
A love story. Where people die in the end.
All love stories are like that. So what's the question?
What was the name of that novel?
The answer at the end of the pod.
This is Mark Gordon from the Jerusalem Post podcast Travel Edition. Find us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at MarkDavidPod, or mail us at markdavidpod@gmail.com.
You know how you've always wanted to be closer to God, David?
I don't know if God wants to be closer to me, though.
On the way to this fabulous museum, which we'll tell you about in a minute, we went past a house belonging to someone called God. But it wasn't a church, and it wasn't a synagogue.
He's a very good, generous, giving God.
He certainly is. In fact, he has paid with his friends for this lovely museum that we're in.
We've come to the city Guba. It's a couple of hours outside of Baku, the capital. We headed along the western coast of the Caspian Sea and came a little bit inland and started to climb. We're 600 metres, which is about 2,000 feet up, which is not that high in this region because the mountains do climb considerably, and we'll hear more about other mountain folk in a minute. But we've come here to talk about mountain Jews.
When you get to Guba, if you cross the river, you come to what is known as the Red Village. It's a suburb that was made up exclusively of mountain Jews. In Azerbaijani, it's Qırmızı Qəsəbə. In Hebrew, it's Ha'ir Ha'aduma.
When you come into this area, first of all, it's rather quiet at the moment because quite a lot of the homes are summer homes, and people who used to live in this region have bought homes up here and they come here in the summer for a couple of months. There are mezuzot on the doors of many of the homes because the Red Village claims to be the only Jewish village or shtetl outside of Israel, and maybe one or two places in America which are predominantly or solely Jewish.
As David said, as you drive through the streets here, it has a kind of ghostly feel. There are the buildings that look like no one is there anymore. I stood in the middle of the road taking a picture of the sign, and no cars came by for a good while.
On the other hand, we saw, as we drove in, some children on the roadside going into their homes at the end of the school day. I think it's a mixed picture. This was a place that originally had 13 synagogues. There are 2 today that are still operating.
And I think there's still a yeshiva here, as well as a mikveh. There is a Jewish school still running in the area. But certainly within the mountain Jewish area, there were more than 200,000 Jews at the turn of the 19th century. Now I think we're down to, certainly in this village, 3,000 and maybe no more than 20,000 overall.
Before we hear from the director of the museum, why don't we just describe a little bit of what we can see? We're in a former synagogue which has been converted into a museum.
It's wonderfully converted, and the museum has taken the best of some of the museums we've been to. There is an interactive centre where you can sit in the chairs from the synagogue and play with the screens and find out what's going on. And throughout what was the synagogue, both the ladies' gallery and the men's gallery, there are display cabinets. You touch every display cabinet, there is a film or a story in Russian, in Azerbaijani and in English.
The stories that are told in the various cabinets and displays are a mix, as is the case in many Jewish museums, where on the one hand you want to tell the story of what does it mean to be Jewish, so you will find ritual items from circumcisions, from weddings, but you will also find out about the history of the local people, both those who just lived here and made a living through tobacco, through making madder, red dye, and those who were the leaders of the community.
And 2 things I've learned here today that I didn't know. Israel's most famous singer, Omer Adam, descends from this community, and also the city of Be'er Yaakov in Israel is named after a famous mountain Jew rabbi.
Why don't we find out a bit more about the thinking behind this small but absolutely outstanding museum from the man behind it, Igor Shaulov.
Maybe we are not the big nation. We are around 118,000, 200,000 all over around the world, but we still have our own history. And for us, it's only one museum, only one unique museum, which is situated in the Jerusalem of Caucasus. We also trying to pass this information to all our children and to take this information from our grandfathers, grandmothers, and to keep it, because for us it's very important. We always tell that your way is starting from your roots. So we have to know our history to continue going further.
The museum is here in Guba. How far does the mountain Jewish community spread within the Caucasus? How many countries does it cover? How far north and south does it go?
Before, the mountain Jewish used to live in North Caucasus. This is Russia Federation and Azerbaijan. So it was starting from Nalchik, Pitigorsk, from that area, finishing with Göyçay, Ismaili, Shamakhi, and other cities of Azerbaijan. Today, we're living all over around the world, starting from Chile, finishing with Australia. So we spread all over around the world, but the main community is living in Israel, in the United States, and in Russia.
What is unique about a mountain Jew?
The unique thing is that we appear here according to one information from 2nd century, according to another from 7th. And we're able to keep all our traditions and all our holidays, all the way of the Jewish life, how they supposed to be. And till now, even the rabbis coming from all over around the world, and they surprised how we are able to keep all of this.
Tell us about the project for opening the museum. Who came up with the idea? How long did it take to build the museum? What have you decided to put in the museum?
The idea was created by our main sponsors, who is originally from Red Village. This is God Nisanov, German Zakhariaev, and Zarah Aliyev. So these three main philanthropes, till now they support all mountain Jewish community, and the idea came that to create such kind of museum in one of the former synagogue in Red Village. So they start to work on that. It take between 8 and 10 years to take all these artifacts, to create the concept, to maintain the building, and finally to open it.
Jewish communities in places like Paris or in other large cities, or even if we're talking about France, a smaller place like Carpentras in the south of France, they have physical evidence of synagogues that are hundreds of years old, or we find coins of Jewish significance from way back, maybe with a menorah on them. Is it a bit different, or even maybe difficult, in a mountain Jewish area where the heritage maybe, and maybe I'm making an assumption and guessing here, that it's more from mouth to ear, it's more an oral tradition, a rural tradition? Does that make it harder to create a museum?
On the Caucasus, it was spread more than 45 Jewish settlements before. Till now, there is a cemetery, so you're able to find them, which is identify the mountain Jewish used to live there, and sometimes they appear in the places where even not know that Jewish used to live before. Secondly, our grandfathers, their parents, and they are passing the information from mouth to mouth, so they telling the stories. For example, I was born in Baku. When I start to come and visit Red Village more and more, the people immediately identify who is my grandfather, who is my grandmother, who is the parents of them, and they know from which family you're coming from, and they're telling the whole story. They even remember who studied with whom. So thanks God, I mean, we have such kind of community which is remember all the good days, bad days, and trying to pass this information to young generation as well.
This, I think, is the third time David and I have been in the Caucasus. We've seen some unique culture, some unique cuisine, unique dancing in the region. How does that reflect in the Jewish community and the traditions of the mountain Jews?
Of course it's reflect. We have our own cuisine, mountain Jewish cuisine. If we will start to compare it with Caucasian cuisine, Azeri cuisine, let's say it's different, but it's slightly different. There is some dishes which is quite similar, but of course we keep all these dishes as they're supposed to be for the Jewish people, like without milk, with kosher meat, etc. And the music, we even used to got a famous dancer was for Lizginka. So till now we have very famous groups. You can see them in Israel. So till now they show these Caucasian dances, which is we accept as our dance as well.
In terms of the village today, how do the people manage in terms of those who want to, keeping kosher, keeping the holidays? There are a lot of very small communities now around the world, for example, perhaps very small communities in Scandinavia, where they have to import their kosher meat and so on. How do things like that work for the mountain Jews in the village?
Well, in the village we have our own shochers who can cut the meat. If there is something which we need and we don't have it, thanks God there is a people who is come and go and bring them. And also if you want, we're able to order it. And there is a rabbis and they have a team which is helps them, which is come to teach them from overseas and work in yeshivas. They are help to organize all of this. So for now we don't have a problem with that.
Where do people find out more details about visiting the museum?
There is a web page. And there is the information of the museum is presented in all brochures and booklets of Azerbaijan Tourism Board. We have a first Jewish channel in Russia, which is our Mountain Jewish channel, which is help us to promote. We have our newspapers. So, it's working. And also there is a people who come and pass information to each other. So we're getting a lot of calls and they're writing in WhatsApp, calling to us. So, it's getting more and more popular.
And the website is jewish-museum.az. Jewish-museum.az. Igor Shaulov from the Mountain Jews Museum. Thank you so much indeed for your time.
You're welcome. Toda rabba, chudo kumak.
Discover the future with Inside Israeli Innovation. I'm Eve Young from the Jerusalem Post, bringing you exclusive insights from Israel's top innovators. Each week, we dive into the latest trends in tech, business, and beyond with interviews from the brightest minds in the industry. Whether it's cutting-edge startups or revolutionary tech breakthroughs, Inside Israeli Innovation is your front row seat to the startup nation. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast platform and stay ahead of the curve. Inside Israeli Innovation, where innovation meets inspiration.
Mark, we're standing by the river that divides Guba from the Red Village. It's called the Gudyal Chai. And you pointed out that across the way, directly opposite one of the synagogues that we just visited, is a mosque.
One of the most amazing things about coming to Azerbaijan is here you are on one side of the river, almost exclusively Jewish community, living side by side with the rest of the population, with the Muslim population of Azerbaijan. This river is almost like a peaceful, smooth flow between the two parts of the city, kind of how I think the government in Azerbaijan would want to portray life here.
I think that's beautifully put. Maybe just a minute on the synagogue that we were just in. To our left is a synagogue which I'm not sure if we're going to go in or not, but it's called the Six Dome Synagogue. But before that, we went into a small 100 and how old did we say it was? It's 150-year-old synagogue of the Mountain Jews. And for those of you who are interested in what Nusach, which type of prayer they do, it's Sephardi, according to Rabbi Ovadia Yosef.
It's an active synagogue. There is a minyan, 10 men, at least 3 times a day, with a bigger turnout on Shabbat. Again, it was beautiful, but much more modest here. Being a much older synagogue, being 140 years old, it didn't have the modern art of the synagogue we saw in Baku in the previous podcast, but it was a lovely little community. And again, possibly a sign of what the community in Azerbaijan is today. One of the gentlemen who was showing us around got his phone out and got a picture of his family and played Jewish geography. In Israel, he pointed to his family who lived near Haifa, and he said, "My family." And a lot of the people here in the 80s and 90s certainly went to Israel. But before then as well, people went to Israel, to America. On the map in the museum, we saw they went to Chile and China and Australia. So the community isn't what it was. And as with when we've been to Uzbekistan, as when we've been to Georgia, these communities are surviving. But what's going to happen, as David always asks, in 100 years' time, in 50 years' time, when this generation are no longer here?
Let's finish on a positive note. We asked another of the community members, and we would have brought you their words, but they predominantly were speaking in Azerbaijani. We asked them a couple of questions about the leadership. When we said, well, you know, did the rabbis come from outside? They said, no, we have a rabbi and 2 cantors, 2 chazanim in this community. They were born and raised in this village, and Judaism remains strong here in the 21st century. Azerbaijan Fact File. The main airport is Heydar Aliyev International in Baku, which acts as a major hub to Europe and Asia. There are smaller airports in Ganja, Lankaran and Nakhchivan. Azerbaijan Airlines flies to Baku from London, Paris and Tel Aviv, and up to 60 destinations worldwide. Tickets can be booked at azal.az and through the app. Tel Aviv is also served by a direct Israel flight. Lufthansa, Air France and major Gulf airlines also fly into Baku. Getting from the airport to the city centre takes around 20 minutes by car or bus. There are shuttle buses on the route from the airport to downtown, as well as taxis available at the terminal exit. You can also use Bolt or Uber. Baku has an underground metro, public buses and taxis. For inter-regional travel, it's possible to rent a car or buy a ticket for inter-regional bus journeys. We stayed at the Sheraton Inn Tourist Hotel, which reopened a year ago after a 3-year refurbishment. Baku also has global hotel chains like Marriott, Hilton, Four Seasons, Fairmont, and soon-to-be-opened IHG and Ritz-Carlton. For those wishing to take a rest from the busy city life, large resorts and spas offering numerous health treatments await in picturesque surroundings. $1 will buy 1.7 Azerbaijani manat as of June 2024. The climate of Azerbaijan can be described as continental influenced, with warm summers and very cold, dry winters. Maximum temperatures vary between 7 Celsius, 45 Fahrenheit in January, and 31 Celsius, 88 Fahrenheit in July and August. Azerbaijani cuisine is full of different types of vegetables and beans. Rice and flour-based products are widely used in national cuisine, and the majority of national dishes are made with lamb, beef or poultry. Rimon Restaurant at 74 Uzeyir Hajibayev Street in Baku offers kosher meat dishes. Shabbat meals and kosher hotel deliveries can be organised through Chabad at chabadbaku.com.
This is the Jerusalem Post Podcast Travel Edition. Find us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at MarkDavidPod or mail us at markdavidpod@gmail.com.
We've travelled about an hour and 20 minutes west from Baku in the direction of a town called Shamakhi. We're overlooking it right now. The terrain changed tremendously from a fairly flat area by Baku, which is on the Caspian Sea. It's actually 20 odd metres or 60 feet below sea level. And we've climbed higher and higher into the mountains of the Caucasus. And as we looked around us driving through, the mountains became more and more severe, steeper. We went through areas that were somewhat desert. Now we're in an area that is lush. But what's interesting in this area, and actually is the background for the entire story of Shamakhi, is tectonic plates. What happened way back, even before Mark was born, was that the Arabian plate slipped under the Eurasian tectonic plate and it shifted all of the land upwards. And ever since that happened many millions of years ago, that this area has been rife with earthquakes. Some of them deadly. In one case, as many as 80,000 people were killed. Of course, today, everything here is beautiful and peaceful, but we're going to hear over the time that we're here quite a bit, probably, about the impact the earthquakes had on this region.
So, if you're coming from Baku in the hour and 20 minutes, you, like David, can look up on Wikipedia the history of earthquakes and how they happen.
This is Mark being jealous because I actually had the initiative to go onto Wikipedia, and he, who we actually call Mr. Google, was busy looking at football scores.
And trying to keep my eyes open after a very, very fun night out with David in Baku town centre.
Anyway, so the first thing we're going to do is to go along a somewhat narrow road. We'll see where it takes us. We've driven a few minutes outside of Shamakhi. We're right on the edge of town. We drove down a narrow road past chickens that were wandering across the road. There were a couple of elderly ladies having a conversation, wearing very traditional dress. And then we climbed and we've come up to one of the highest points immediately overlooking the town. And we've stopped in a graveyard. There are many graves here of people who've been buried fairly recently, and interestingly, something that we've seen actually not just in Azerbaijan, but something we also saw in Georgia, is that on the modern graves, almost embossed into the gravestones, the pictures of the people who've died there. And in some cases, it also shows you what they were. Obviously, a lot of times in this part of the world, they're soldiers, but not just, and you see the people's smiling faces onto their gravestones. But we've come to a much older part of the cemetery, and we've come inside a mausoleum. Mark, do you want to describe?
The mausoleum is probably around 10 foot by 10 foot, although it's actually a circle rather than a square. And in the centre of the mausoleum, there are 3 old graves, predominantly plain stone, but the 2 outer ones have paint and colour in them. There's Arabic written on them. The top of the mausoleum is 25 feet high. We could get our guide's app out and measure it like we did in the Carpet Museum. It's very peaceful here. As David said, we're on the edge of town, the city that has 40,000 people, and here we're in this very quiet green space.
Suleiman, tell us about the people who were buried here. What are the stories?
In Azerbaijan, we have tradition, and that our presidents or prime ministers or some government officials, they are burying in special places or in common place with special things. So that's why we are using or tombs here, and nowadays some monuments like Heydar Aliyev monument in the graveyard. So we are in the Yedi Gümbez, or we can call here Kalakhane. Yedi Gümbez means 7 tombs, and there are 7 different tombs here that buried the family and the relatives of the last Khan of Shirvanshah country.
A Khan was, I guess you'd say, like a prince or somebody, a duke who ruled over a specific area. And when you're talking about Shirvanshah, we're talking about one of the regions here in Azerbaijan.
The ancient grave in this area from 1810, so they are all about the Mustafa Khan, the last Khan of the Shirvanshah.
As we've already said, this area, there have been numerous earthquakes over the years, and as a result, you say 7 mausoleums, 7 groups of tombs, but there aren't 7 here today.
No, we can see only 3. We can see the part of remains, but the tomb, complete tomb, there are only 3.
You said the name Shirvanshah for the Khanate, the region. When we were in the old city in Baku, there was a palace called Shirvanshah. Does this mean that this Khanate covered Baku as well, or that's coincidence?
We cannot say Khanate. This was a country, empire, so it covered all area of Azerbaijan, and the Shirvanshah palace in old city, because the capital of the Shirvanshah country moved from Shirvan to Baku because of several earthquakes, so and that's why they constructed the Shirvanshah palace in the top of the old city in Baku.
To talk the latest news in Israel, the Jewish world, and everything in between.
This is the J-Post Podcast. I'm Tamar Uriel-Beery, Deputy Editor-in-Chief of the Jerusalem Post.
And I'm Tzvika Klein, Editor-in-Chief of the Jerusalem Post.
And I'm Sarah Ben-Nun, Night Editor at the Jerusalem Post. Join us as we bring some of the most impactful voices to bring you into what it means to be Jewish, to be Israeli today.
Every week, we bring you with us into the newsroom in every sense.
Stop being so dramatic. This is just our coffee break.
You can find us every Thursday on jpost.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
We'll see you there.
Yalla, bye.
We've driven around 30 minutes from Shamakhi. We left the tomb, and without making a joke, we came through this little part of the village by the tomb full of larders, and there were literally chickens crossing the road. So we have come to a village in the mountains called Demirci. Demirci, I think, literally means smith, as in a blacksmith, somebody that works with tools. It is very isolated, beautiful green mountains around us, and we are really lucky that we've been allowed to come into one of the workshops here. The village has a tourist centre at the front where you can see these traditional crafts taking place.
So what you're hearing in the background is someone we're going to be introduced to in a moment, an elderly gentleman wearing a traditional Caucasian hat, almost like a Bukharan kippah for those of you who are familiar with the idea. He's wearing a jacket. It's actually, even though we're in late May, up here in the mountains it's quite chilly. It's 12 degrees, which is
around 52 Fahrenheit.
We're not in coats, but we're in fairly warm jackets, and the noise that you can hear is he is in the middle of making a series of axes, of cleavers, which clearly are actually for practical use that are being sold here. They've got a wooden shaft, and then they have the metal axe, the cutting area at the top. Behind him, he has a forge. He's got the traditional anvil that you'll be used to seeing from medieval times, and then all around the walls of this very small stone room that we're in, it's 10 feet by 8 feet, something like that. It's just covered in tools of the trade. Absolutely no idea what any of them are. Mark is actually looking right now at a samovar. There is a gorgeous teapot just in front of him. Down below on the table, we see a silver bracelet.
Or metal.
And now we're going to find out a little bit more from our host.
Özüm Hüseynov Ağaseyim Məmmədoğlu, Dəmirçikan sakiniyəm, Kətdə yaşayıram, Ustiyam.
He said, I am Hüseynov Ağa Hüseyin. I am living in Demirci village and I'm a master blacksmith.
How long have you been a blacksmith?
Çoxdan 67 yaşın içindəyəm, elə bu işlə məşğulam. 7 yaşında.
He is 67-year-old. Since 7-year-old, he started and doing this business.
Is this a skill that has been in your family for many generations, or you're the first person in the family to learn this?
Bizim onu demək üçün, anlatmaq üçün belə bir şey var da.
His father and grandfather were masters, actually. And also there were 40 masters in this village. This is the main job in their life. They were educated, but they were doing this like a business. All area for the house and the agriculture and like everywhere to make the nails also for the horses. It means everything they prepare themselves.
Təhsilimiz də olub, atam müəllim işləyib, ancaq dəmirçilik sənətinə məşğul olub.
What are you making today?
Bu gün ət kəsən.
Today he's making eggs for the meat. Now they are not ready, but he's preparing it. After that polishing, it will be ready for the selling.
Çörək pulumu qazanırım.
How long would it take to make one of these axes?
Bir gün.
Only one day.
When we came in, you were trying to establish a language that we could talk in, and then you found out that we're Jewish, that we're from Israel, and you said tat, you said johuri. That means that you understand or you speak the same language as the Jewish people of Azerbaijan. Is that right? You can understand each other?
There are several nations here, like Moluccans, Lezgis, Tats, Talish, etc. But the language Tat, Johuri or Lahiji are same. All originated the Farsi language, so that's why they used to live together and peaceful and also worked together. That is the life in Azerbaijan then.
The village is quite isolated. You've lived here all your life. Do you ever think maybe I would like to go and live in a big city, or you can't beat a place as beautiful and peaceful as this?
Yox, elə mən sevmirəm şəhərləri. Mən kənd həyatını sevirəm.
He is a countryman, he's a mountain man. He said that I don't like the cities and to live in that crowded places. Only peaceful places okay for him.
Thank you very much for inviting us into your foundry and for showing us your craft and smiling and laughing with us. It's been a really interesting experience.
Siz də çox sağ olun, xoş gəlmisiniz. Hər birinizə təşəkkür edirəm. Bütün insanlara sülh.
You are welcome. It was a great pleasure for me. I wish you all the best.
Have you listened to the Jerusalem Post podcast travel edition yet? Hi there, I'm David Harris, and together with co-host Mark Gordon, we bring you the very best of the world of travel.
We've had our safety instructions and we're in a basket.
Either the cars are shrinking or we're going higher.
Now sat on a high chair.
You're listening to the last will and testament of Mark Simon Gordon.
We're in the independent micronation of Ujupis.
If I wasn't married, I'd be chasing away your indigenous 78-year-old and taking you for myself.
The drink afterwards, just to calm my nerves, will be number one, but this is definitely up there.
The Jerusalem Post podcast travel edition brings you the joys of travel and tourism. So why not subscribe today wherever you get your podcasts? Mark, we're in your favourite place once again.
I can hear bottles. I can smell grapes.
Maybe just explain where we are and then we'll introduce our next guest.
We've come to Abgora, about 10 minutes outside Shamakhi, to the Shivan Wine Company. And we're in the bottling room, having gone on a fascinating tour of the barrels, the vineyards, the visitor centre.
unlike older wineries where they start with small amounts of wine and build up over the years and eventually think about tourists, because let's face it, they were making wine before tourists began. Here, there was the idea of a local businessman in 2015 who opened this entire facility with both tourists in mind and serious amounts of production, exporting to 11 countries.
If you listen back to our Judean wine podcast, we went to Domaine de Castel and Nouveau Winery. Domaine de Castel, I think, was 30 years old, and he was producing around 400,000 to 500,000 bottles a year. Here at the Shivam Wine Company, they're already looking at 2 million bottles of wine, and the company is less than 10 years old.
So let's find out a little bit more about the company.
Hello, my name is Ruslan. I work here in Shivam Wines as a wine specialist. We started in 2015 with 40 hectares, and we brought especially French variety grapes like Marcellan, Carignan, Grenache Noir, Meurverde, Sancerre, Grenache Blanc. These variety grapes. Also, we have a local Azerbaijani grapes as well, like a Bayanishwar, Madrasa, Shirvan Shahi, Hindogni. We're also using Georgian grapes like a Sapiravi, Ricatstelli, and Sven, these grapes. And we can make maximum 2 million bottles per year, but that is depending on weather conditions, as you know. That is depending on harvest. We're planning, of course, also to opening a factory for grappa next year. So we already started to build a factory.
From what you were telling us on the tour, there is fertile ground here. It's a beautiful place for growing grapes, but it's also a place where there have been many earthquakes. How do those two factors affect wine production?
The Shamakhi used to be a capital, old capital, but we had a lot of earthquakes. Now we don't have any more, so we are happy with that side as well. And this special soil that we have, that is good for grape.
We went into the gigantic fermentation room, and I didn't see anybody there other than us and other people walking around. Where are all the staff?
All this equipment are designed to use less of human labor, so that is all automatic. So we have only 9 workers in the factory, and most of them working in the bottling line.
In terms of the types of wine, do you just have one white, one red, or do you have many varieties?
We have 6 different types of wines. We have 3 red wines, 2 white and 1 rosé. And each wine has a different kind of amazing taste. Even reds, we have 3 reds, but we can easily see the difference between these 3 reds.
Are they all blends?
Yeah, we are using a blending because we have a special variety grapes, Azerbaijani. We have a nice soil and good climate. We have French grapes, we have a Georgian, and we have a Azerbaijani local grape. So we are happy to using all these variety grapes. That's an advantage for us.
So you'll mix a Georgian grape with an Azerbaijani grape or a French grape in the same bottle?
Yes, definitely. That happens in one tank. And we have a special equipment, special tanks, which is French brand, Para branding. And we can keep the wine inside these tanks because we have a special jacket side. So through that side, we give a special glycerin material that is help us to keep the temperature in control.
If people want to find out about Shivam wines and this place, how do they find out?
We have a website. We have also Instagram page, meysari.com.
It's spelled meysari.com.
You're listening to the Jerusalem Post podcast travel edition with Mark Gordon and David Harris.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's that time again when we visit a winery and disappear for about an hour. What's on the menu today?
We have 3 different wines in the menu. We have a white wine, which is called Bellevue. The second wine is called Sanam, and the third one is red, which is called Marjan.
We will be back with you shortly. Have fun, because we're going to.
Oh, Mark.
It's good to be the king.
It is great doing a travel podcast for the Jerusalem Post. It is great doing a podcast for Mark and me, and we hope you also, at least vicariously, get some pleasure. Talk about wine, Mark.
It's really rather good. No, we had an excellent hour with Ruslan. He explained the different taste sensations, what to pair the wine with, the cheeses, the honey, the little green fruits that we don't know what to call them.
They're sort of like a slightly sour plum. And what he was saying is, let's take the plum with a white wine. The white wine is very dry, but as soon as you put the plum in your mouth, even though the plum itself is also sour, when the two are paired together, you get an unexpected sweetness.
And we were learning about the nose, and Ruslan was swirling my glass for me. He's a gentleman, because I hurt my hand yesterday. So he was able to swirl my glass, and then sorry, Suleiman in the corner is cracking up and trying to make me crack up.
For those of you who didn't listen to our episode in Baku, I suggest you do, but Mark had a very, very serious accident.
Yes, I had a boo-boo on my finger. My glass was being swirled, and we got the plum, we got that little bit of menthol. It was really educational. I really enjoyed myself.
So once again, meysari.com. What a bummer.
Yeah. So we all shot through the heart, that one.
Oh.
And you're to blame.
I'm bummed out. Why am I to blame?
Because you give love a bad name.
Oh, I see. We're in lyric land.
Modern pop music, David.
If you remember, way back, actually for us it was days ago, but for you about half an hour, 40 minutes ago, we said that we were going to do something interesting with an interestingly named place.
It's also interestingly placed.
But through a series of technical glitches, we did not go shooting in Bum.
No. Had we looked on a map, we'd have realised it was an extra 4 hours on our day that we didn't have just to go shooting in a place called Bum, which was quite a funny idea. And our lovely guide, Suleiman, found an alternative venue for us.
To go shooting.
Back in Baku.
So you'll have to listen to our previous episode in Baku to see if we actually went shooting in Baku as well.
But as you've already listened to the episode and there is no shooting in Baku, you'll realise when we got there it was closed.
Oh, the joys of organising these things. And I know you realise how pained we are that we weren't able to bring you yet another exciting adventure on our travels.
But we're more pained, although we probably would have been more pained had I been let loose with a gun.
So talking of Suleiman, let's start our thank yous with him. He's like a really cool dude.
Yeah, we were very blessed to be given Suleiman as our guide / leader / minder / everything. /
he loved making fun of Mark, which was fantastic. It was great. It was brilliant. He's very sarcastic.
And talking of / when we were at the blacksmith, he bought this great big knife and started shaving his arm with it just to prove how sharp it was. So, Suleiman, we love you, honestly.
In fact, we like him so much that we've now dubbed him Solly.
And his Hebrew is still better than mine.
His Hebrew is unbelievable. In the list of thank yous, we have to say thank you to Experience Azerbaijan, Azerbaijan.travel, and any other mixture of those three words.
I think Azerbaijan Tourism Office, as we call it in Israel.
Also that. Oh, so talking of which, let's this time put right up at the top our good friend Jamila from the Azerbaijan Travel Office in Tel Aviv, who really, I guess, introduced us to the world of Azerbaijan in her office and has brought us wonderful treats, kosher Azerbaijani desserts made in Israel at various times, and it's been a real pleasure working with Jamila. We'll carry on doing so.
And a big thanks to the team in Azerbaijan, led by Florian Sengschmidt, the CEO of Azerbaijan Tourism.
Travel Azerbaijan.
Azerbaijan.travel. And the wonderful people that helped make this trip, Layla, Lala, Javanshir, and Gunel, amongst others.
Thanks to Chabad, especially Rabbi Shneor Segel and his wife and lovely kids, for looking after us over the Shabbat that we were here.
And they do some wonderful, wonderful work. We were very privileged, and if you listen to the other podcasts, you'll probably hear us mention it again. We were very privileged to spend Shabbat with them and see their work in the community and how here where there aren't as many Jews as there used to be. They have people coming from all over just to have a connection with their Judaism, and it was a really lovely experience.
And they have a daily minyan for Shacharit, Mincha and Arvit, the 3 daily Jewish prayers.
And not just us, they did feed some other waifs and strays as well.
Who were less wafy and strayy than we are.
Yeah, no, I'm never wafy. I think wafy's thin, isn't it?
Amazing wafy in the hotel. The Sheraton in Tourist, great place to stay. Thanks again to the airline that brought us over here, Azerbaijan Airlines.
We're saying thanks now, and hopefully we'll be saying thanks when we go. No, they've been great.
Right, is that all the thank yous?
I think so. Thank you, David, for being my friend.
Oh, I'm not going to say thanks back.
No, because you hate me.
Incredibly so. So much so that the gift of chocolate that I was taking back to Israel, I'm about to unwrap so that you can share in that pleasure with me.
Oh, so your family can now hate me for eating their
Absolutely,
chocolate.
100%. We urge you to contact us at MarkDavidPod on social, markdavidpod@gmail.com. Send us a lovely review via Apple Podcasts. By the time you listen to this, Google Podcasts might no longer exist.
And then it's, I think, going somewhere near YouTube.
Yes, it's going to YouTube and, of course, on the lovely Spotify and wherever else you get your pods. Just by making a nice comment on there or by rating us helps us with our work and doesn't cost you anything.
Quiz question, David.
Quiz question, Mark.
We mentioned a novel, and I won't go into the questions again because it was longer than the podcast, but what novel is based in Azerbaijan and tells the love story of a man from Azerbaijan and a woman who is a princess from Georgia?
And the answer?
The answer is Ali and Nino.
Folks, we hope you've enjoyed this podcast. We're not going to say as much as us because we know we've enjoyed it more, but do join us the next time. Also, if you've got any suggestions for places that you would like us to go other than down below, please get in touch with us and make some suggestions and maybe we can make it happen.
Especially if you know the PR people at the airline that would fly us.
So for now, from beautiful Baku and indeed the rest of Azerbaijan, we wish you shalom shalom.
From this wonderful country where people have been so warm with us, we wish you goodbye.